All right, let me ask you a question. What if our feelings, your joy, your frustration, your sense of peace, what if they aren't just stuck inside of you? What if they're actually a language that speaks directly to the world around us, shaping the reality you experience every single day?
You know the feeling, right? It's Friday, you're in a massive hurry, you gotta get to the bank, you look at all the lines, you pick one, and what happens? Every single time. You get stuck behind the one person who's doing their taxes from 1982. Or you're late for a flight, you're on a single-lane road, and boom, out of nowhere, a giant truck appears going 5 miles an hour. It feels like the universe is messing with you.
Well, what if those moments aren't just random bad luck? The material we're digging into today suggests that this is actually a conversation. It's like the world is a giant mirror, reflecting back the feelings we're carrying inside. That feeling of being rushed, that tension, it's being shown right back to us. It suggests that we're in constant communication with everything, whether we know it or not.
And that gets us to this core idea, the language of feeling. The theory is that we're always speaking to the fabric of reality through our heart, through our emotions, and that language is feeling. Every emotion you have is like sending out a little command, a piece of code, into this invisible field that connects absolutely everything.
Now this might sound like some brand new idea, but it's really not. It's actually ancient. Over 2,000 years ago, this text from the Essenes was talking about this exact same thing. It's saying that the world you see out there is just a mirror of the world in here. It's an idea that's been woven through spiritual traditions for centuries.
And it's kind of funny how old ideas get new names, right? What ancient traditions called a reflection, some in modern physics might call a quantum hologram. The whole idea behind a hologram is that every little piece of it contains the entire picture. Well, the source suggests reality is just like that. It's an unbiased feedback loop. It's not judging us, it's just showing us a perfect picture of what we've become inside.
Okay, that's a pretty huge idea. But is there any proof beyond just stories and ancient texts? Well, let's take a look at how some modern experiments have tried to actually measure this connection, specifically when it comes to the feeling of peace.
So, people started looking into this in a serious way back in '72. In 24 cities across the US, groups of people who were trained to create feelings of peace got together. And the results? Well, they were pretty wild. In those cities, there were statistically significant drops in violent crime, traffic accidents, even emergency room visits. It seemed like the effect was real and you could actually measure it.
So then, they took this idea and tested it in about the most stressful place you could imagine, the war zone in the Middle East in the early 80s. Trained people were placed in the region, and their only job was to feel peace. The results, which were eventually published in a peer-reviewed journal, were just stunning. During the times they were doing this, terrorist activities just stopped. Violent crime went down. And they checked everything, holidays, weekends, moon cycles, and the correlation was still there. It was undeniable.
In fact, the results of these experiments were so consistent, so predictable, that the researchers figured out they could actually calculate the minimum number of people it would take to get this thing going in a bigger population. They found a formula, a threshold for change.
And here it is. It's actually surprisingly simple. The number of people you need to positively influence the quality of life for everyone else is the square root of 1% of that population. Now think about that. Not 1%, the square root of 1%. It's a tiny fraction, suggesting a small group of people in sync can have a huge, outsized effect.
So what does that actually look like? Let's break it down. For a whole city of 1 million people, you don't need thousands. The formula says you only need about 100 people to hit that tipping point. And for the whole world, over 6 billion people, the number is only around 8,000. That is a tiny, tiny number of people to potentially have such a massive impact.
All right, but the evidence doesn't stop with these peace studies. In 1998, Princeton University started something called the Global Consciousness Project. They basically put 40 random event generators all over the world to see if they could detect big shifts in a global field of consciousness. The big question was, is there a collective consciousness and can we actually measure it?
So get this. These machines were just doing their thing on September 11th, 2001. After the attacks, the researchers went back and looked at the data, and what they found was just incredible. The readings went completely off the charts during the attacks themselves, which you might kind of expect. But here's the truly mind-bending part. The machines started picking up weird signals, a kind of growing static in the field, a full day and a half before the first plane ever hit.
So, what does this mean? It raises this unbelievable question. Did humanity, on some deep subconscious level, feel that something awful was about to happen? The scientists are careful, of course. They don't want to jump to conclusions. But the data lines up with so many stories of people who just changed their plans that day for no good reason.
People who decided not to go into work at the towers, or who canceled a flight last minute. It's like we might be tuned into something much bigger than we realize.
Okay, so if this field exists, how do we consciously tap into it? Our source material makes this really crucial distinction about how we pray or set our intentions. See, there's the prayer where you ask for something, like peace. But when you ask for peace, you're kind of admitting that peace isn't here right now. The other way is to feel the feeling of peace as if it's already happened, to be grateful for the peace that already is. You're affirming it exists, making space for it to show up.
And this exact idea was put to the test back in 1998 during a global prayer vigil. Hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world joined in, and they weren't asked to pray for peace. They were invited to just feel peace. Now, what they didn't know was that at that exact same time, U.S. warplanes were on their way to targets in Iraq. And then, something really strange happened. Right in the middle of that 1-hour window, a rare stand-down order was given, and the planes turned around and came back.
Now look, you can't prove that one thing caused the other. A scientist would just call it a stunning correlation. But it points to this really powerful idea from the source material, that in the presence of a coherent field of peace, the only thing that can happen is more peace. It's like when you walk into a quiet library, you naturally lower your voice. The field itself changes what's possible inside of it.
So, we've looked at the big picture, these global studies and world events. But what does all of this mean for us in our day-to-day lives? Let's bring it all back home and think about what happens if we see every single moment as an act of creation.
The author of our source material tells this really powerful story from a trip to Nepal. He's in a busy square, and he feels a little tug on his pants. He looks down, and there's a man with no legs on a little wooden board with wheels. And his first thought, his immediate assumption, was that the man was begging. So he reaches into his pocket to get some money. But the man just waves it away. And instead, he points up at this absolutely magnificent, beautifully carved building that the author had completely walked past without even noticing.
You see, the man wasn't after money. He just wanted to be seen. He wanted to share a moment of beauty, to be acknowledged as a person, not as a label or a judgment. And in that one moment of real connection, both of their worlds got a little bit bigger. It's just this powerful reminder that every single person we meet has a unique world to share with us, if we're willing to see it.
Which brings us to the big one. For you, for me, for all of us. What if every single feeling you have, when you're stuck in traffic, when you're at your desk, when you're with your family, what if it's all a prayer? A literal instruction being sent out into this creative field? What if the universe doesn't hear our words, but it feels our heart, and it responds to that feeling, literally? Man, how would that change the way we live?
So as we wrap this up, I'll just leave you with this one thought. Just take a second and check in with yourself. Right here, right now, what's the feeling in your heart? Because if there's anything to this idea, that feeling isn't just some passing mood. It's the prayer you're broadcasting out to the world, and it's creating the reality that's being mirrored right back to you. So, what are you praying for?